Got it.
There we go. Well, good morning, everybody. Saturday, April 27, Coffee and Conversation, DFL 52. We are privileged and pleased to have our state chair, Ken Martin, and the state director, if I got your title right, Ron, of the Biden-Harris campaign this morning. I note that's a very distinguished audience as well. State Senator Carlson's with us. State Reps Ryer and Vernig are here as well. So it's quite a group. As always, you all know to hit the raise your hand when you want to say something, or if you've got a question or what have you. Ken, I know that you're getting ready to leave town, so let me start with you, if I might. Okay, tell me the things that are on your mind this morning. You're going to Bismarck. You're going to talk to Democrats in Bismarck. What's worrying you at this stage of the campaign?
Well, first, thank you, Ron, for having me, and of course, to our Senate district. We got a little bit of noise in the background here, so I apologize. I'm at the airport, as you mentioned. But I do want to just reflect for a moment on the moment we're in. We have 191 days until this critical election, and I'm glad that Ron Harris, our state campaign manager for Biden-Harris campaign, is on today because Minnesota is arguably, one of the most important battlegrounds. I wouldn't say it's the most, but it's certainly a battleground state, and a reflection of how important it is, the fact that they already have people on the ground, Ron, Lana Peterson, Justin Bowen, and others. But, for me, as I mentioned, I'm heading to Bismarck today, and, I believe very strongly in terms of our national party that we have to organize everywhere so we can win anywhere and everywhere, I should say. And so it's really important to me that we are out there engaging Democrats in every part of this country, and I'm excited to be there. You asked a specific question about what's worrying me. So, the reality for Minnesota is, we have some baked in advantages, of course, but one of the things that I want to reflect on a little bit, and I'm sure Ron could talk about it at greater length, is in 2016, Minnesota had the second highest third-party vote share in the nation. And of course, that resulted in one of the closest margins for the presidential race in Minnesota in a long time. In fact, 44,000 votes, a point and a half, we just narrowly hung on. And what led to a lot of that, of course, was third-party defection amongst our base. And so, this year, right now, RFK and Jill Stein are polling higher than we've seen at this point in previous cycles. And my biggest concern is making sure that our base understands the stakes of this election. If you think to 2020 and the recipe for President Biden's success, that of course was consolidating the base. He got about 98% of Democrats to support him. There was only about a 2% flake-off rate. And then the swing with independent voters, about 2/3 of independent voters swung his way. So right now, sitting 191 days out, my biggest concern is not the Republican nominee or Republicans. It's frankly Democrats, and making sure that they understand the consequences of this election and the existential stakes in front of us. Again, right now, as I said, the independent voters are split about 50-50, and RFK's polling at around 15 to 17% nationwide. So we've got a lot of work to do in these 191 days to make sure Democrats are consolidated behind our president and that independent voters swing our way. Can we do it? Absolutely. Will we do it? I believe we will, and I believe that we'll keep Minnesota blue thanks to Ron's leadership.
And thanks to the people who are on this call and many others like us who are out there knocking doors and making phone calls. But Ken, I've got, in the context that you raised, I've got two questions I want to have you address. First, the coordinated campaign. For those people on this call who don't know what that is, would you explain what it is? Tell us a little bit about what its status is, and tell us how the coordinated campaign works and is related or interrelates to, say, the Biden-Harris campaign, the Klobuchar campaign, and for us, the Angie Craig campaign, and of course our state rep campaigns, because we've got those offices to win this fall as well. Tell us about that.
Well, first, you should know that Minnesota was one of the first states in the country to have a coordinated campaign, and our coordinated campaign model is usually looked to as one of the most strongest coordinated campaigns in the nation, but also the most efficient. You should also know that a coordinated campaign is really born out of two pieces. One is campaign finance laws that allow us as a state party to essentially run what are called multi-candidate expenditures, allowing us to essentially pool resources and coordinate directly with all the candidates. State and local party committees are unique this way. This is our superpower within the ecosystem. We can raise hard dollars and soft dollars, commingle those together with our candidates and directly coordinate. There's no other entity in politics that can do that. And so it's both a legal construct, and then there's also the political side of it, which is here in Minnesota, we have deep collaboration amongst all of our partners, our electoral partners and progressive partners and allies like Labor and others, who believe that we're stronger together than if we're running programs on our own. And that means that we raise a lot of money. The largest amount of money that we raise and spend as a state party is on the coordinated side. And so just to give you an example of that, we are going to probably spend on the DFL side, on our operating side, $5 million this year. On the coordinated side, we'll probably end up spending around $15 to $20 million. And so it's quite a significant campaign that's put together. So you asked a specific question about Senator Klobuchar and other candidates. What is their role? So as I mentioned, we have a very strong spirit of collaboration at the DFL in terms of our coordinated campaign. Even when people aren't on the ballot, they're investing, they're team players, they're making deep investments in our campaign. So for instance, Governor Walz will be investing, close to $500,000 in this effort this year, of course, raising into the party to help with all of these coordinated expenditures. And so even when people aren't on the ballot, they're investing in because they understand the importance of electing Democrats up and down the ballot. So, it's our senators, the governor, our congressional delegation, Attorney General Ellison, our constitutional officers, of course, the House and Senate caucus, and then in addition to our electoral partners, it's our progressive partners and allies. We have, I think, around 12 or 13 labor partners, choice groups, and others who sit around this table to strategize and put together the campaign.
So if somebody on this call
Oh no, it looks like Ron's got technical difficulties. What do you think he was going to ask?
He was going to ask if someone on the call has a question, I think. So any questions?
And we will use the raise hand feature. I'm not setting that so that anyone can just unmute themselves. So if you have a question, please use the reactions down at the bottom to raise your hand. Anybody have a question for Ken? All right. So are you just sitting in the terminal, Ken? You're not even in the Delta Club, or?
No, I'm not that fancy. So I travel so much, I probably could qualify, but I'm not that fancy.
Kind of nice, but yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Any questions on the coordinated campaign, or, obviously, let me talk about our down ballot priorities this year. In addition to the president, obviously, we're deeply invested in making sure we hold the 2nd congressional district for Angie Craig. That will be one of the, as it has been the last few cycles, one of the most expensive races in the country, and also one of the most competitive. I expect that to be no different this year. Angie will get a lot of support and help, of course. And it also helps that the Republicans really are in disarray right now. It looks like they'll likely have a primary on their side. But none of us should take that for granted. It's going to be a very close race in this highly polarized electorate. And then, in addition to Angie's race is we have opportunities in other congressional districts in CD1 and CD8. We've got great candidate challenger campaigns there in Rachel Bowman in CD1, Jen Schultz in CD8. And of course, we're very excited about Kelly Morrison, Senator Kelly Morrison's chances in Congressional District 3. That's a fairly safe district these days, but first election, we have to do our work there to make sure we get out the vote. And of course, one of our top priorities, in addition to President Biden keeping Minnesota blue, is winning and keeping the state House majority, which will be no easy task, to be honest with you. I think there's a lot of advantages we have baked in after redistricting. but it's not a certainty that we're going to keep the House majority. And frankly, a lot, I know folks were joking around on the front end of this call about, you know, what's going on in the legislature right now, but it has significant consequences, not just on this, you know, how we end the legislative session here, as I'm sure the members on this phone could tell you, but it has significant consequences on how this upcoming election will be framed. And so we're all watching very carefully, of course, and there's been lots of conversations to make sure we both come out of this legislative session with a great story to tell for Minnesotans, but also strategically that we're prepared to win this year. And so, yeah, I guess that's what I would say, Lisa. There's a lot at stake here, and we're ready to go.
Looks like Representative Ryer has a question. Liz? Oh, wait, I got asked. There we go.
I had to give me permission. Thank you. Thank you to both you, Ron, Harris, and Ken for being here today. This is really great. And I want to just put in a plug for how well the coordinated campaign has worked for me, especially in my most recent election. I thought the collaboration was really strong. I felt like there was partnership with saying, what's our objectives? What are our plans here? All the way down to saying, we're going to these turfs. What are you doing? So we weren't tripping over each other. It was really well done. And I think it made a big difference. My question is, I think part of that is because our Senate district is really well organized. And so spreading the word about how good the coordinated campaign can be is a tougher sell in some other. Do you have any advice on how to help other of my peers say, here's how you work with them to make it work?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, we have great faith in the infrastructure that Lisa and all of you on the call here have built over the years. And, you know I saw Lynn Carlson on the phone earlier, and Jim, of course, you know, I remember when I moved into Eagan, and even before that, how red it was. And you guys have been at it, slowly building this machine, and it's such a powerhouse. And that's the credit of all of you on the phone. And so it's easier when you have infrastructure built already, a robust volunteer base, people on the ground who understand campaigns, and a willingness to partner together, right? And you're right, that's not true every part of the state. I wish I could say that all Senate districts and organizing units were created equal. They're not. And that's the work that the party has to do, both in the short term and the long term, is try to get people into those positions so they're partners at the table, like Senate District 52 is, in helping to guide the coordinated campaign. So I don't have an easy answer for you, Liz, but you know, you're absolutely spot on about I think the coordinated works best in partnership with the local units when they're fully integrated into the campaign and understand their role and responsibility, and vice versa. And so, you know, I'm happy to talk to any of your colleagues about it for sure. I also believe, and this is a testament to all of you as elected officials, in some parts of the state, our elected officials don't participate in the party. They don't really care if the party's strong or weak. And as a result, there's no long-term infrastructure building. So we need your colleagues, Liz, in the House, and Senator Carlson, your colleagues in the Senate, to really understand their responsibility, not just to the legislature and their constituents, but also to their party and helping to build within their districts. So hope that answers your question, Liz.
Well, and for us, when the coordinated campaign invited us to their office and challenged us to door knock once a week, I think that really helped. You know, because the local party units don't always understand what the coordinated campaign even is. So if the coordinated campaign can invite the local, you know, the local activists in and explain it and get them on the team, I think that's a great way to go. And yes, the Carlson's amazing job here in Eagan, and Lynn has her hand up.
Thanks, Lisa. I just wanted to follow up on Liz's comment on the 2022 coordinated campaign in Eagan. That was the best run coordinated campaign that we've had here in contact with our campaign. Usually we have coordinated, and I mean, The Carlson campaign is coordinated with our House districts, and we've divided the district into 3, and each of us takes a chunk. So we're not overlapping each other, and we're sharing our literature. Given our personal family problems in 2022, I could not handle the door knocking coordination. I gave all those duties over to the coordinated campaign. They took it on, and they coordinated everything so that we were just going into the district one time with everybody's literature. And I can't praise that group enough. They did an excellent job. So if you could get that team back together, it'd be awesome. So
We'll take them. We'll take them. You guys had some of the best folks down there. I hope they come back into the fold. So if you see them, encourage them to apply again. We'll take them in a heartbeat.
I think that
I have one- I
Bowen's some law firm now, so I don't think he'll come back. So
Right.
Okay.
I have one more question for Ken before we turn over to Ron Harris, and that has to do with election integrity and voter protection. What's the plan? Are there any real concerns about that this time around?
Well, there's always concerns about that, right? Because the Republicans will stoop to no end to try to make it harder for people to vote. Even in a state like Minnesota, surprisingly, every election cycle since I've been chair, we've had to stand up a very significant voter protection program. And we're doing that again this year. We already have our voter protection director on board, Elizabeth Boyles, who was our deputy voter protection director last cycle. She's already been hard at work for the last month, both on reaching out to elections officials and administrators throughout the state, and also our council in putting together that organization. We will be adding more people into that, and of course, Ron, we will be working with lawyers like yourself and others who plugged into this effort in the past. It's really critical, and we're seeing attempts by Republicans, not just in Minnesota, but all over the country, to really challenge voters' abilities to actually cast their votes in ways that we haven't seen before. And so, when we talk about threats to our democracy, there is, of course, the election itself, but there's all the work that goes in by Republicans and conservative groups in the months and weeks ahead of an election, where they're trying to essentially suppress the vote and make it harder for people. So, I'd love any of you on the call who want to be engaged in that effort. We're already started that effort with Elizabeth, and I'm happy to plug you in. And Ron, if I could introduce Ron, and then I'm going to hop off real quick for all of you.
Perfect. Please do. Please do.
So Ron, of course, many of you know Ron. He's no stranger to DFL politics, having served as a DNC committee man, thanks to all of your support over the years. He's also been one of our national party leaders, elected multiple times now by the Midwest Caucus, DNC members from all over the Midwest, to be the chair of that caucus. It was no surprise that President Biden and Vice President Harris tapped him to be our state director because, of course, he has significant campaign experience as well, having worked for Senator Al Franken, having worked on a number of campaigns here in Minnesota and around the country. Of course, his day job before taking this on was as Chief Resiliency Officer for the city of Minneapolis, and then, of course, working for the global sustainability effort. And so he's really been helping us think through the challenges of how we build for the future. And again, it's no surprise that President Biden tapped him because he's a perfect person for this role. I'm really excited. Of course, Ron's one of my best friends, but more importantly, he's one of the top and most strategic political operators in our state. And I'm so grateful that he's here with you today. I'm just pleased that he's going to steer us to victory in November. So I'm going to hop off, both Ron and Ron, but I know you're going to kill it. So have fun, guys. Take care.
Thank you so much, Ken. Thanks for all
Ken,
you do.
safe
Have a
travels,
great
brother.
trip.
Bye-bye.
I think we lost Ron again. He needs to
man.
upgrade his Wi-Fi or something. Ron Harris, do you want to give us a little intro?
Absolutely.
And then anybody who has
And,
questions can raise their hand.
I appreciate that, Lisa. And thank you to you, Lisa, for your leadership of this Senate district and the other leaders on the call in the Senate district, including our state representatives and our state senator. Really appreciate the invitation. Ken, like Ken said, I've been involved in the DFL probably 10, 11 years now, which is kind of odd to think about. I remember when I first got involved in the summer or fall of 2013, I met Ken Martin at an event, and he invited me to run to be a DFL state director. I had no idea what that meant. I just thought, oh, it's it's a board of like 12 people. I'm going to take a board spot at the state central committee meeting, and he's like, no one else is running. And I remember showing up to, it was Washington Magnet High School at the time in St. Paul for a state central committee meeting. First person I see is our former Attorney General Lori Swanson outside with a dog taking pictures. And I'm like, oh, this is a bigger deal than I thought. And then I walked into the school, there was about 400 or 500 people there. And not only was the position not unopposed, like Ken had said, there were 9 other men seeking the role, seeking to run. So I knew nothing, I knew no one. And luckily at the time, the president of the Young DFL nominated me because I needed someone to nominate me. And Ken was like, don't worry about it. All you have to do is get up there and give a speech in front of everyone. It's going to be fine. And I'm like, again, completely unprepared. Got up there, talked about why I really was interested in politics and what I wanted to bring to the table as a young person. And the body saw fit to put me on there. And so I share that story because that is how one of the best ways you can get someone involved in politics is invite them to a real opportunity and demonstrate that we want their voice and their leadership as part of the larger discourse. And ever since then, I've been on the DNC for like the last 8 years, considering seeking a 3rd term. And then right before I took this role working for the president's campaign, I was actually candidate for Congress in the 3rd district. Decided to jump into the race and decided to step aside on caucus night, recognizing that I had a wonderful opponent, State Senator Kelly Morrison, who I believed would build the right infrastructure, fight for every single vote in the district, and never take the seat for granted. And those are my 3 values that I wanted walking into the race, and then recognizing that someone else had those values and was well equipped and decided to support that person. And so I thought I'd get a little break after running. And about a week later, I got the call. And when the president and vice president call, you don't say no. And so I just said, we'll get our break on November 6th after we are declared victorious, after we keep the House blue in our state, after we win the state for Joe Biden, then we can all rest. But again, thank you all for allowing me to join you this morning.
You'll be secretary of what in Biden's cabinet the next time around?
With all your hard work, we got to make sure we get across the finish line.
Of course. Tell us about the Biden campaign in Minnesota, the structure, your plans, and to follow on with our conversation with Ken, how you work with the coordinated campaign.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So we have our most senior leadership in place, myself as state director and campaign manager, and we have 2 really great and seasoned operatives and senior advisors in Alana Peterson and Justin Bowen. And I'm sure both you all are aware of both of them. We are actually in the midst of hiring and onboarding people as fast as possible. So right now, focused on the next senior positions of Chief Operating Officer, Communications Director, Political and Coalitions Director, and an Organizing Director. So the way I envision this campaign in Minnesota, on Biden for President, BFP, is that, and I'm glad, Ron Golder, you opened the question about the coordinated campaign at the DFL. So here's how I think about it. The coordinated campaign, we really want to rely on and support them in their efforts to focus on essentially winning the seats up and down the ballot. We want to make sure that they are well equipped to do much of the organizing work. So much of the canvassing, much of the volunteer recruitment, right? Much of the on the ground relationship building. I think the coordinated campaign is well equipped to do that. BFP, we receive money that we then support the coordinated campaign with as one of the seats at the table of the coordinated campaign that Ken had said earlier. And I think that we're going to build an operation on the Biden side that is far more political, coalition building, and content and communications to help facilitate the organizing that is happening at the coordinated campaign. So we're still going to recruit, leaders to work on behalf of Biden. We're still going to recruit volunteers, and we're going to recruit our volunteers to then support the on-the-ground efforts to make sure that every door is knocked and every voter is talked to as possible with those campaigns. So all that to say, to complicate it, we're working together hand in hand to make it happen.
Okay. I worry about duplication of effort, and also on the flip side of that, something falling through the cracks. You know, having seen the coordinated campaign work over the last few cycles, I know that people show up in an office, they're given a turf, they go knock doors, they're given a list of people to call. This year, it seems one of the efforts is going to be postcards. I get that. And I know that's what the coordinated campaign does. When you said, and I'm not sure I'm going to get all the words, but you said the Biden campaign is going to be more political. I don't know what that means and how that's different from the door knocking stuff.
One slight difference, because we're doing everything the coordinator is doing, but one slight difference is that when you work a presidential campaign, it's a lot easier to get the attention of community leaders, for example, grass tops leaders, if you will, to help open up the neighborhood, help open up the community, help open up the industry, to then allow our coordinated efforts to come in, right? So we're going to try to get those big relationships, get them on board, so it facilitates the work that people are trying to do on the ground. So for example, if I go to a certain Muslim community, or I go to a certain community of color, we need to make sure we tapped in with those leaders that then help facilitate our ability to go in as trusted partners in the work. So I'll be spending a lot of time with tribal leaders, a lot of time with imams, a lot of time with rabbis, a lot of time with industry leaders to help set the ground and help set the environment, so then we can go in and talk to the people on the ground and turn them out to vote.
Well, there's so many directions I could go after that comment. Let me pick up on a thread that Ken laid out, and that is the third party vote. Talk to me a little bit about what you're seeing in polling in Minnesota. There was a recent KSTP poll, I believe, that showed the race is close. Ken mentioned Jill Stein and RFK Jr. I don't see much from Jill Stein going on this year so far. Maybe I'm just missing that, but I sure do see a lot of RFK. Is that a harm for the DFL, for President Biden and Vice President Harris? Or is RFK going to pull votes from the Republicans? Which way do you see that going?
Based on polling, both previous and current, and based on, frankly, their own admission, the RFK campaign will pull votes from us. The reason being is it's both, from my perspective, ideological as well as psychological, and I'll say it this way. The conservatives, right, the Republicans, there's polling that suggests that 98% of them will come back and support Trump after 2016 and 2020. So that means that their base is pretty fixed. They're not moving. When it comes to our base, we saw polling of about 80 to 84% as of about a month ago that said they were going of Democrats that said they were committed to Joe Biden, who voted for him in 2020. So what that tells me is that they're not here today, but our work is to ensure that they're here tomorrow and the course throughout. That also tells me that we don't have much wiggle room to be finicky about our vote, right? Like literally, when I think about the folks in Arizona, for example, who rolled back the state to 1864 abortion ban, I tell people the people that want to bring the country back to 1864, if you remember that year, right? We're in the middle of a civil war. Slavery was still legal, right? The president was assassinated about a year after that, right? So the people who want to bring us back to that time, I make no guarantees in politics except for one. They will show up to vote, and they will show up to vote for Trump. They're not going to play around with third-party votes. And so we are, on the left, on liberal, on the Democratic side, are playing around with these third-party votes. So I say all that to say, I'm actually very worried about the third-party votes. I'm worried from the perspective of, I don't see the polls as being determinative or predictive, but they reflect where we need to do our work right now. We are a state, as you all know, that elected Jesse Ventura, right? Senator Sanders won the primary in 2016, or it won our state's primary in 2016. We've had progressives like Al Franken and Paul Wellstone. We've also had people like Michelle Bachmann and Tom. I mean, we are such a unique state and a very kind of independent-minded state that third-party risk is a big one. The last thing I'll say is we have the second highest voter percentage of our folks who voted uncommitted in the presidential primary, 19%. So we will be sending the largest volume of uncommitted delegates to Chicago for the national convention this year. I think 11 delegates national delegates will be uncommitted. So all these things tell me that this third party thing is pretty serious, especially when you look at the margins of victory that we've had in our state and presidential cycles.
Well, I don't disagree that you've got a lot to focus on with varying entities, but I think they come around. For example, the 11 uncommitted votes, as I understand it, high level, they were uncommitted because of the Middle East, Israel-Palestine issue, and they wanted to send a message. Are those folks going to vote against Joe Biden? I don't think so. Will people who feel that way out in the community vote against Joe Biden? I don't think so. Then you did not mention, for example, the Nikki Haley votes. Haley continues to get an amazingly sizable portion of votes. Which state had a primary just the other day? Was it Pennsylvania that had a primary and she won like 19% of the vote and she's not even running anymore? Are those pro-Biden votes? They're certainly anti-Trump votes. Will they turn out for Biden? Will they stay home? I don't care if they stay at home particularly. I'd rather they vote for Biden. I think you're underselling it, and I don't blame you, but I think you're underselling it.
My job is to not be pessimistic, but to take nothing for granted and take nothing to chance.
Of course.
And
of course.
And I'll just share with you all on this call in SD52. It's a balance between projecting real confidence, because I have faith in the plan that we're building. I have faith in all of you on this call. I have faith in the people of Minnesota who are knocking doors every day and talking to their neighbors and turning out to vote. And we have the highest voter turnout, as you know, in the country. I have faith in that, but also projecting a sense of reality that we're only okay if we do the work. We're only okay if we sign up for the shifts. We're only okay if we recruit the volunteers. We're only okay if we find a way to make sure that the uncommitted folks, we're only sending a message and not sending a message in November, right? And I think to your point, Ron, I think they're not lost. I think they're gettable. I think that the folks who voted uncommitted have a recognition that we only have, at the end of the day, two choices. And this was their one opportunity on the ballot to send a message and to say, hey, look, I don't like what's going on, or I disagree, or what have you. And because if they were solely anti-Biden, they would have voted for another candidate on that ballot. That's my belief. At the same time, the Republicans who voted for Nikki Haley, are they in the same mindset? Are they saying, hey, this is my one chance to send a message to Trump, but at the end of the day, I'm going to be back on the team? We have to consider that part as well.
Fair. That's fair. You know, in that same context, I worry about enthusiasm, voter enthusiasm. You hear the concept of voter fatigue a lot these days. I mean, you try to turn on the television, you'll get one of two things. You'll get Twins baseball, oh God, or the Trump trial, oh double God. And neither one is very good. But voter enthusiasm there's voter fatigue and not voter enthusiasm, which leads me kind of perversely to a different subject, and that is Joe Biden has done such an incredible job, particularly in the face of all of the opposition that he's had. It amazes me. Passed incredible legislation, incredible economic stuff. People forget that 4 years ago we were in the middle of a pandemic and how we came out of that. Why doesn't that generate positive vibes, polls, enthusiasm, and how can we make it? How can we make that happen?
It's a really great question. It's a really, really good question. And when I think about enthusiasm, it reminds me of, I got my political start in 2008 volunteering for Barack Obama's campaign, and then again did some work on his campaign in 2012. And I remember that there were people who would be willing to stand on a table in a lunchroom and just proclaim their support for President Biden or President Obama, how excited people were, and they'd finish their turf packet and they would show up for extra shifts and things like that. And I remember in 2016, there was enthusiasm for Secretary Clinton, but it wasn't at the same scale. And even though committed Democrats showed up and voted for her, right? At the time, she had the highest raw number of votes of any candidate to ever run for office, including the person that she ended up losing to. This enthusiasm is so important because it's the difference between I'm going to show up to vote, or I'm going to show up and bring 5 friends to vote, or I'm going to show up and I'm going to pick up a volunteer shift and recruit 3 other volunteers to knock doors as well, right? I mean, that's where enthusiasm actually starts to show itself, is in the work. certainly the work to get out the other votes, right? That's why it's so important. It is it's almost head scratching as someone who is running a campaign and talking to my colleagues around the country. When we look at the vast amount of accomplishments that President Biden has done this term with this government at this time within this context and that predecessor, it is actually phenomenal. Very few presidents, if any, have accomplished more in one term. We as Democrats, and you all have heard this before, we talk about not being very great at messaging, and I think that's true. And we haven't done a good enough job of storytelling about the impact of some of these policies. So one story that I share, a personal story, is that I was able to buy my first home in 2021. And as somebody who had so much student loan debt, I never would have had the opportunity to buy my first home at the time that I was able to if President Biden hadn't extended the pause in student loan payments every month. Him extending that pause allowed me to save enough money for a down payment to then take advantage of the low interest rates to then be able to buy a home. Without that policy, without clear public policy, I would not be in a position to not only contribute to the economy at the way that I'm able to, but start the traditional American path of intergenerational wealth through home ownership, right? So we need to do a better job as Democrats of talking about the real life stories and the real life impacts of some of these policies. Now, the challenge that we have is that things were so bad, President Biden had to come in and right size and steer the government back into a direction that that restored the faith that people have in our government and our democracy. And the impacts take a while for that to feel on the ground. So the economy is very strong. I mean, by literally almost every single measure, the economy is strong. We've recovered faster from COVID than any other nation on the planet. We have a super low unemployment rate, and we're creating jobs every single month. Minnesota is certainly in that space of having very low unemployment and good economy, high stock market, all these things. But when I was a candidate for Congress, I'm knocking on doors and people were still like, yeah, I'm not feeling it, which means that it takes time for these policies to sink in. And while it takes time for those policies to sink in, we have to do our job on the ground of telling the story of the impact that we've already seen. And the last thing I'll say on this, Ron, is what gets me enthusiastic and what I think will get other voters enthusiastic about this race is definitely talking about what's at stake, reminding people of just how bad things were 4 years ago, reminding people that the pandemic was significantly worse because of the leadership that we had, his embarrassment on the foreign stage. I can go down the list, right? Locking kids in cages, I can go down the list. Reminding people how bad it was, reminding people of what's at stake, but also reminding people of the opportunity that we have in front of us to build upon progress, right? To engage more people, to expand the economic benefits that we've seen to more folks, to make sure that there's more money in people's pockets, to make sure that women get the rights that they deserve, and then we protect the rights that they currently have. We need to talk more about the opportunity in front of us as well.
Sure. The question, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? Oh yeah, I'm not injecting bleach into my veins. That's you need to have those kind of quick, short, pithy comebacks. Liz Ryer, you just posted something in the chat section that I couldn't quite read about this issue of what you want President Biden to do that he hasn't already done. Did I lock up again?
No, that's not it. When I'm talking to people and they're complaining about Biden, so, well, what would you want him to do if he were 5 years younger, 10 years younger? What things would you still wanted him to accomplish that he hasn't done? And they're just like silent. It's like, it's nothing. There isn't any complaint about him as a president. It's this gap in perception of whatever. And so to me, it really bringing them back to the policies and to the concrete accomplishments, and just like lifting this veil of, it's like, oh, these say, it's the very rumory kind of argument against him that doesn't have substance. And I think, as you were saying, too many rounds, Ron Harris, bringing it back to the concrete accomplishments and making it real, I think is the way to do that. Because when people realize that they're not thinking concretely, they kind of settle down sometimes.
Representative, I think that's a really, really astute point. I think for a lot of us in politics, we think very political. So you roll out a list of accomplishments and policies, I'm excited, right? Hey, for me, that's enough. But we have to remember that the vast majority of this country is not on, Saturday morning coffee with their Senate district, And so we are a special breed is what I'm trying to say. And if us going through a list of accomplishments isn't getting folks fired up and jazzed up, again, how do we break them down and make them real? So, there might be people whose eyes glaze over when you say he capped insulin prices at $35 a month. You're like, oh, okay, that's cool. But then you say, hey, my grandmother's a diabetic and she's on very fixed income. And we were going to have to move her into assisted living because it was a lot cheaper than having her live independently until the president was able to cap those prices for insulin to $35. She's now saving an additional $300 to $400 a month that now allows her to live independently without going broke. Now someone's like, oh, wow, that actually makes sense, right? The president and the party have actually doing work to improve people's lives. The other thing that we do with folks that I think is going to work is not only talking about the president and his accomplishments and what he's done, but talk about the role that you played in his ability to get that done. If it weren't for you, if it weren't for us coming together in 2020 and sending the loud message that we did, he wouldn't be in a position to do that. If it weren't for you showing up in 2022 to stop the red wave, right? We would not be in a position to have passed some of those policies. For young people, if it weren't for you, the hundreds of billions of dollars of student loan debt that has been canceled and forgiven, that would have never happened. The largest investment in climate, the largest climate investment in our nation's history would have never happened had it not been for your voice. So your voice, you may feel like your voice isn't being heard right now on this one issue, but if you look at all of these other issues, we would have never got that done if it weren't for you. So when people see themselves as part of a larger effort and feel like they have some credit for their contributions and the connection to the outcome, I think that gets people a little bit more bought in as well.
John Wells, I'll be with you in a minute. Ron Harris, there was a question raised in the chat, which raises, again, a bigger subject for me. Some years ago, you'll remember Michelle Obama said, when they go low, we go high. I think it's been proven that that doesn't work. And in the context of what we just talked about, all these wonderful policy successes that Joe Biden has, that's going high, and people aren't getting it. So let's flip the script. And let's talk about, okay, if they're going low, we go lower. Linda Bosma asks, shouldn't we be pointing out how awful Project 2025 is? Shouldn't we be doing more of the negative advertising about how awful? I promised myself I wouldn't raise Donald Trump, but golly, in the political scheme of things, you almost have to. Shouldn't we be talking about what an awful guy he is? Should we do more of that?
I don't think that's going low. I think that's being honest. That's being honest about the leadership the lack of leadership that he brings to the table. It's being honest about the things that he has said that he has done and the things that he said that he wants to do. For as dishonest of a man that he is, he's very honest when he talks about his intentions for this country and for this democracy and what he wants to look like when he's a dictator on day one. Project 2025, which I saw someone mention in the chat, is not a joke. That is not a campaign ad. That is not a gimmick. That is a real plan and a real strategy with 4 pillars that is very well thought out, right? Pillar 1 is the massive policy agenda. Pillar 2 is a leadership academy to ensure that they have the right leaders in place in every seat in the country to be able to advance those policies. Pillar 3 is, I think, an electoral strategy. Right? So I go down the list with how organized this effort is, and they're telling us exactly what they want to do. So from my perspective, I don't think it's going low. It's being honest, and I think we need to communicate about all of it. We communicate about the stakes. We communicate about the opportunities. We communicate about the reality of the human being who is currently sitting in trial, advocating for a second term after being impeached twice, about having the first time that our American Capitol was attacked since 9/11, and it was under his direction, right? A man who just had to pay $83 million for sexual assault, a man that had to pay, owes the state of New York almost $500 million for fraud and for lying about his assets, and a man who is currently on trial for hush money payments for an extramarital affair. That is not going low. That is just being honest, and people need to hear about those things too.
John Wells. John?
There we go. All right.
Okay.
Ron, what you just said, Ron Harris, what you just said just hit what I was trying to get at. It's inconceivable to me that somebody like the character you just described and the party you just described is polling even or even a tad ahead in some polls. I guess it's changing slightly now, but than our president, who's been the most effective president since at least FDR. And it's incomprehensible, and I don't, it's just so like, will people wake up? And maybe we're in the sleepy doldrums, 9 months or 6 months before an election, and it'll change, particularly as all these court cases delayed as they may be, and may continue to be, bear fruition. At least we have the one in New York. It seems to me that people will not embrace that lie forever. And the question is, when will they start saying, oh, geez, this is not much of a choice, and what's become of my party? We support Putin over democracy in Ukraine, for example. Everything's messed up and overshadowed by what's going on in the Gaza Strip, and that's a tragedy and sad, and wish we could just wave a wand and fix that. But that notwithstanding, I don't know if this is a question or not, but I just have hope that people's perspectives will change in the next 6 months, and that it'll dawn on them that we can't bring this force of chaos back into anywhere near the leadership of this country that person once had.
John, I appreciate that comment, and I'll respond to it or add to it by saying this. I am optimistic that people will come around. And my optimism comes from what I mentioned earlier about all the hard work that you all are going to do, that we're going to do, that the collective is going to do. My optimism is also connected to the fact that, as salient as this conversation and election is for us on this call, I still meet people to this day who are still like, we're not going to have another repeat. We're not going to have a repeat election in November, are we? Is Trump really going to be the nominee? Is it possible Trump can actually win? I mean, people still ask those questions, which tells me that folks aren't as tuned in yet, which I think is in some ways a bit of good news, because that's the purpose of a campaign. Now we have the opportunity to get people tuned in and help tell the story along the way over the next 6 to 7 months. And
somehow we have 7 months to make them see what is really reality. It's not just a one side, it's a reality. And I remember when my first awareness of a presidential election was 1960, and I remember somebody saying, oh, it's the vote between the lesser of two evils, between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon. And I heard that phrase again a week ago or a month ago, and it's like, wake up, America, be good democratic citizens, and do your duty of understanding what the score really is. And I hope we wake up to that.
I think we will. The more we tell these personal stories, the more that neighbors see neighbors taking action. At a certain point in time, surrogates and even the principal isn't as motivating or convincing as the person you see every day, or your barber, or your hairstylist, or your mailman, or your book club, or whoever the folks are you spend proximity with. Our job is to get those people prepared so that we make the case out here, and then they're solidified with their relationships, and when they see their neighbors operating a certain way. It's the reason why I've always been a fan of lawn signs. Even though people say lawn signs don't vote, lawn signs do influence. There are people who look at my house when every November, and they're like, okay, I don't know who to vote for, and they drive past Ron's, they're like, okay, I'm gonna vote for Walls. Right. I mean, that's a real thing. And I think as we get closer and closer to the election, there we go, right? Those signs. We get closer to the election, John. There'll be more opportunities for that, and I think that's gonna get people to realize how real this is. Not only how real it is, how important their participation is in shaping the direction of this country. Like that's a piece I really want to emphasize, is that you are individually important to this broader collective and the direction that this country is going.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Cheryl Casey, your hand's up. Nice to hear from you, by the way. I hope Steve's doing okay.
He's not doing okay. He really
I'm
isn't, but
sorry.
that's okay. I mean, what are we gonna do? That's life.
We're,
I guess
we're sending you our love and support.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I've been more or less incognito here for sure, and feel like I don't have time to volunteer anymore. But my question is, I am staying at home pretty much, and I have the TV on, and all I hear about is Trump. And I'm wondering what party leadership can do to change or influence our media outlets so that we start hearing the good things that Trump is doing rather than just they're making Trump bigger than life, and that's all people are hearing about. So that's my question. I'd like to know what party can do to, get what Biden has done into the media.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thanks for that question, and thanks for all your work. At the national level, we are breaking fundraising records, which is a great thing that demonstrates a level of enthusiasm as well as having more resources to be able to get our message out. We've already started some ad buys in some major states, that very expensive ad buys, which will start to get the stories out there and start to get some ads on TV to get people talking. Here locally, we are going to be doing a series of press roundtables. I will do press calls at least once a week just to make sure that we're replacing those stories, right? Both paid media and earned media, making sure that we are just forever present and making sure that President Biden and his accomplishments are top of mind for people. At the same time, we can only do so much on TV and on ads and in the press. We have to combine that effort again with a grassroots canvassing, door-to-door engagement program. And so the way it's looking right now is all those things are going to come to a head. They're running parallel and they're going to come to a head here pretty soon. We're also recruiting a lot more surrogates to be able to go on TV and to do the Sunday morning shows and to be on MSNBC and CNN, and we'll send Pete Buttigieg over to Fox because he's so good over there with those folks. And we'll be doing the same thing locally as well. So there is an effort to make sure that we bring this conversation to top of mind and make sure that it's hitting the airwaves. And but there's something about, I'll be honest, there's something about our opposition here. He was in show business, good, bad, or ugly, mostly bad and ugly. He knows how to capture attention, even when it's his freedom and money on the line. It's uncanny, and we have to take it for what it is and take it as seriously as we need to, and make sure that, and the other part of this is that people, and I don't know where to land with this, I'm just sharing it with friends. It's like people want to be entertained more than they want to be governed in some ways, right? Like there's such an interest in the noise and the drama, right? And then when you get something bland, like normal functioning government, like good policies being passed, like not being in the news every single day for something crazy that you said, it's like people's attention kind of wanes because it's like, it's not capturing them, right? I'm not saying these people won't vote for us. I'm saying that when it comes to attention, it's just something that we have to continue to consider. So we want to build a fun and engaging campaign, for example, that how do we change how people feel about politics and participation, and showing that, it's awesome to the point where I'm happy to show up at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning to talk politics with friends because we love it so much. How do we do things like that to get people engaged and excited about, again, the opportunity that's in front of us?
I have two more questions. I don't see any other hands up at the moment. One of the hot issues.
There is a hand up, Ron. There is a hand up.
Oh, is there? Who am I missing?
Chuck
oh,
or
is that
Charles?
Chuck? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I forgot. Your hand is actually embedded in a thing that's on your wall in the back. I didn't see it. Go ahead.
My map's in Minnesota. Yes. Ron, I had a question as somebody that's in my mid to late 20s, which is a graceful way of avoiding me sliding into middle age here.
Oh, hey, watch it.
My conversations with peers my age are so often about age with this particular election and this particular candidate. It feels like every time we're talking about politics, I get the video of 4 more years pause got sent to me. I don't know how many times this week, 3-4 times. And they're like, we know you're a big Democrat, you're a big Biden guy, but we hate Trump. We hate Biden because he's too old. He can't do it. There's a report in the Times this week that people are like trying to cover up the way he walks in order to avoid some of those age questions. And I think that's a real enthusiasm challenge. What's the campaign strategy for dealing with that? I mean, it's inevitable. You can't hide from the age question. But it feels like a lot of my peers are more inclined to stay home because of it rather than show up, which it's a concern for me.
Thanks, Charles, for raising that. I appreciate that concern. And there's no easy answer. This was definitely not a softball question. Here's how I think about it. When I hear people say that, first question I ask is, where has President Biden's age stopped him from being able to do his job? and there's typically no response. Then they talk about, well, he sounds like, he's saying the word Paul, whatever, in his speech and things like that. And I'm like, well, he's an older guy, but he's always had a speech impediment as well. But that also hasn't stopped him from being able to do his job. Then I asked them, I said, Bernie Sanders is older than President Biden, right? And they're kind of like, so it's not, so it's both age and the perception of age. And then we start talking about the age of the ideas of the other side. How old is an 1864 abortion ban in Arizona? Right, that's an old idea, So I'd say I'd much rather have a guy who's 81 years old than a guy who has 91 criminal indictments. Not only that, if you're concerned about the president becoming incapacitated, which God willing that never happens, we don't have to face that. We also have a vice president for a reason. And not only is he 81 years old, but he's 81 and he's accomplished all these things which his age has never gotten in the way of his ability to do the job. And I think equally as importantly, as young people, we're not only voting for a president, we're voting for a team. We're voting for an administration, right? The youngest and most diverse administration that the country's ever seen. We're voting for a vision for what we want the country to look like. We're voting for our ability to have someone in office who, if we protest or if we advocate, we have a friendlier audience than we would have if somewhere else were in office. We're voting for our ability to take over leadership, take the reins of leadership one day or today, right? And so that is actually what we're voting for. We make it so much about one person, and he is one person, but he is the face of all of these other things that we're actually advocating for. And so, and I asked them this, the last thing I say is, we are voting for a vehicle to take us into the direction that we want this country to look like. We're voting for our ability to shape this country. If we don't vote and the other vehicle gets in there, we have to do that much more work to even get to the point to where we are today, to then build upon that to take leadership for the future. The last thing I say is, as young people, millennials and Gen Z in particular, this is the largest voting bloc the country's ever seen. There's a lot of power here if we show up and make our voices heard and shape the country the way that we want to. If they stay out, there's also a lot of power. It means that we're going to lose. So I try not to argue with people. I just try to lay out as a less young person than you, but still I think young. That's how I've thought about it as well. That it's so much more than one person. It's about the team. It's about us. It's about our ability to shape the country. It's about the vehicle that we want to get in to take the country forward. It's about priming the country for our leadership that is to come, that we're experiencing already today and we're going to experience tomorrow, and our ability to be ready when the baton is passed.
Well, that's a better 30,000-foot view question than I could ever have given you. So given that we have hit over an hour at this point, and I see people starting to drop off, maybe we should just stop it there and Ron, give you a chance to give us any final thoughts you have on what we can do to help you, to help the Biden campaign, to help the coordinated campaign have that vehicle that will drive us in the direction we want to go.
Well, I appreciate that. And
Senator Carlson has his hand up too. I don't know if we
Oh,
want to.
I'm sorry, I missed, gosh. Hold on to that thought, Ron.
Yeah.
Jim?
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate what you just said about the team. And I have to say that I have to drop off because we're having a caucus that starts right now. But I do want to ask, you can tell the follow-up people here, what is your plan for the colleges and the campuses? Because you were involved in the Obama election, and we did a super job in Minnesota on campuses. In 2010, when the GOP wiped us out and became the majority, we had a terrible turnout in campuses. And I always go back to, and people have probably been really sick of me reiterating about Northfield Ward 3 Precinct 1, where we lost that seat that represents that precinct. It was David Bly. He had 79% of the vote, and we didn't have people turn out. We didn't have people get pre-registered. We dropped from 2,080 that were pre-registered at the time of Obama down to 1,521. And we only had, I believe it was 34 of that 1,521 turned out to vote. And David Bly lost by 37 votes. So, it shows how much the importance is of getting people registered to vote at these campuses, because it's a goal, it's a vein of gold that we can make sure that we capture. And it happened in all of the campuses that are across Minnesota. We even lost Oberstar in Duluth. So, this is really important for us to make sure that we get all the young people we can to be registered to vote where they vote. I can't listen to your responses because I have to run. And
Thank
I
you,
think you all
Senator.
know how important that is right now. So we'll talk to you later. Thank you very much for getting on the coffee and conversation. And I hope you get some coffee.
Thank you. Thanks for the work, Senator. Have a great one. And thanks for the question.
Thanks, Jim.
I'll answer that one. There's kind of a multi-pronged effort here to make sure that we're getting youth voter turnout, not only turnout, but registration. Number one, we are going to have surrogates visiting campuses. We've already had someone come in at the U of M, a musician, Adam Met from the band AJR, went on campus, we organized a climate policy and climate justice conversation that was well attended, 50 people, 30 of which ended up registering to vote there. So things like that, having people show up to campus and things like that. The second thing that we're doing is really, building a very content forward campaign. We're hiring a content and mobilization director who is going to be putting things out on social media, TikTok, Instagram, things like that. That's where the conversation's going. And we're going to be creating content to make sure that people see the relevance of the campaign and hear our stories on different platforms and in different venues. The third thing is that I've advocated for doubling the amount of youth organizers that we have on our campaign so that we can spend a lot more time on the ground, building authentic relationships as early as possible. I'm investing in about a $500,000 paid canvas program that hopefully we'll be able to get started just around state convention time. And we're going to have a very large student intern program as well. So I think by engaging young people on the campaign and then spreading them out through each campus, having surrogates, having very specific messaging for those students, and then making sure that we are doing the sorts of engagement efforts that lead to voter registration is the focus for now. Yeah.
Cool. Well, Ron, thank you so much for spending some of your Saturday morning with us. Thank you for your leadership of the campaign. I don't know if you have any closing thoughts for us, but we certainly look forward to seeing you out on the trail, crossing paths with you, and of course, let us know how we can help. Any final thoughts for us?
Just thank you for your time and thank you for all of your work. I'll be engaging you so much over the course of now until Election Day on November 5th. My email address is rharris@joebiden.com. I just throw it in the chat here for you too.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, the Facebook Messenger that we've been communicating on is not the most efficient way.
No,
and
it's
that's the
not
only
good.
one I had.
So shoot me an email. We're always recruiting volunteers. We're staffing up here pretty quickly. And we're looking for a headquartered office as well. So we're still kind of building up the infrastructure to get us going. But what you all can be doing right now is organizing yourselves like you're doing today, organizing your neighbors. If you want to host a house party, let me know. We'll get you the materials. That's the most important thing you can do right now is start to engage people early before they go off for, summer vacations and things like that. Just make sure we stay in touch. Let me know what you're hearing out there. Let me know as you're having conversations, how they're going. If you need information or talking points, I can send all those things too. And happy convention over the next couple of weeks. I'll be seeing some of those and certainly at the state convention as well.
Cool. Lisa, any thoughts from you?
Thank you so much, Ron Harris. I have great confidence in the Biden-Harris campaign. I'm excited about it. And thanks, Ron, for hosting. We don't have
As
that
always.
much going on this week here in DFL 52. It's kind of the end of the month quiet week. So everybody have a great week.
Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. See you later.